door. Not with flowers, not with comfort, they brought a spreadsheet. They said I owed them half of his $500, zero life insurance. Because they once helped with my college tuition. If you've ever wondered how far family entitlement can go, stay with me. This story will change the way you define love, grief, and blood ties. Claire Reynolds had always found comfort in the rhythm of her mornings. They were quiet, predictable, safe. On that Tuesday in late April, the sun spilled through the kitchen window just as it always did, casting a golden glow on the marble countertop where her daughter Ella sat cross-legged drawing a sunflower in her sketchbook. Claire flipped blueberry pancakes while Daniel, her husband of 11 years, brewed coffee, humming some tune she didn't recognize but had heard a dozen times before. "I made you an extra pancake, princess," Claire said, setting a warm plate in front of Ella. Ella beamed. With extra syrup, Daniel leaned over and kissed his daughter's forehead. "Only the real stuff. Not that fake corn syrup your mom tries to sneak past me." Claire rolled her eyes, smiling despite herself. "One of these days you're going to realize I'm always right." Daniel chuckled as he poured 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to Claire. But where's the fun in that? Their mornings were never dramatic, never loud. Just full of soft jokes, shared glances, and tiny rituals that had become invisible threads binding them together. Ella's sketchbook sat always on the table. Daniel always left with exactly 2 kisses, one for Claire, one for Ella. Claire always watched him go with the same quiet certainty that he would be back by dinner. That morning was no different. Or so it seemed. Daniel grabbed his laptop bag and slid his arms into his blazer. He looked sharp, polished, but still relaxed the way he always did before big client meetings. "I've got that pitch at 10, but I should be home early." "Don't forget, Bug," he said to Ella, "your art show's tonight." "I'm going to win Best Tree," she said proudly. "I wouldn't doubt it," he replied. "You're the most talented tree drawer in the state." Claire followed him to the door. He turned at the threshold, gave her that look, the one with the half smile and the soft eyes, and leaned in to kiss her. "I love you," he said. "I know," she replied playfully. "Bring home dinner." He laughed. "Pasta or tacos? Surprise me." And with that he left. The door clicked shut behind him. At 10:42 a.m., Claire was folding laundry upstairs when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She answered distractedly. "Hello, Mrs. Reynolds," a woman's voice tight with urgency. "This is Marlene, Daniel's assistant. I'm so sorry to call you like this." Daniel collapsed during a meeting. Claire froze. "What? He just fell." We called 911. They're taking him to Mercy General." "Is he awake?" "They're doing CPR." Claire's heart dropped. "I'm on my way." She didn't remember grabbing her purse or locking the door. She barely managed to call her neighbor to pick up Ella from school. Her hands were trembling as she pulled out of the driveway, barely seeing the road through the blur in her eyes. The drive to the hospital felt like a lifetime and an instant. She talked aloud in the car, babbling prayers, whispering bargains with a God she hadn't spoken to in years. "Please let him be okay. Please. Please. Ella needs him. I need him." She didn't remember where she parked. She ran into the ER breathless. "My husband, Daniel Reynolds. He was brought in a few minutes ago, cardiac arrest." The nurse looked up, her expression changed. "Please wait here." Claire sat. Stood. Paced. Her fingers clutched her phone like it could anchor her to reality. Then a doctor appeared. His name tag said Dr. Harmon. His expression told her everything. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said gently. She nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." He went into sudden cardiac arrest. The damage was massive. Claire shook her head slowly. "Number. No, that's not. He was fine. He made pancakes this morning. He packed Ella's lunch." Dr. Harmon's face was kind but firm. There was nothing anyone could have done. Her legs gave way. She sat without realizing she'd done it. "Would you like to see him?" Claire nodded. The room was cold. Too quiet. Daniel lay on the hospital bed with a sheet pulled up to his chest. His lips were slightly parted, his face pale. He looked asleep. Peaceful almost. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched his cheek. It was still warm. The tears came then. Not loud, not messy, but silent, steady, unstoppable. She whispered, "You promised you'd be home early." The nurse stood quietly in the corner, giving her space. Claire leaned forward, pressing her forehead to Daniel's. "I didn't get to say goodbye." She sat there holding his hand, trying to memorize the weight of it. Trying to slow time to make it all go backward. But time only moved in one direction. And this morning, this ordinary, lovely, pancake-filled morning would never happen again. The first night without Daniel, I didn't even have my parents. Claire didn't remember leaving the hospital. One minute she was whispering into Daniel's ear, the next, she was standing in her kitchen staring at a coffee cup he'd used just that morning still sitting in the sink. The world hadn't stopped, but hers had. It was nearly 6 p.m. when she realized she hadn't eaten, hadn't called anyone but the neighbor who picked up Ella from school. Her daughter. Ella. Their daughter. Claire drove to Ellen's house with an eerie steadiness, as if her body was on autopilot. The moment Ella saw her, she ran into Claire's arms, her small face crumpling the second she realized Daniel wasn't with her. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, her voice trembling. Claire pulled her close, sitting on the curb outside Ellen's house, holding her daughter tightly. She couldn't say the words yet. Not in front of Ellen, not on a sidewalk. "Let's go home, sweetie." At home, Claire wrapped Ella in a blanket and gave her a mug of warm milk. She sat beside her, holding her, not sure how to begin. She was still deciding when Ella whispered again, "He promised to come to my art show tonight." Claire blinked back, a new wave of tears. "I know, baby. He really wanted to. But something happened today at work. Daddy's heart got very, very sick." Ella looked at her wide-eyed and confused. "Can the doctors fix it?" Claire's lips trembled. "No, sweetheart. Daddy died today." The scream that tore from Ella's throat was unlike anything Claire had ever heard. It was animal, ancient. A raw, primal sound of grief. Claire held her daughter as they both cried, rocking back and forth on the couch as the world outside spun on. Later that night, when Ella had finally fallen into a restless sleep in Claire's arms, still clutching Daniel's favorite t-shirt, Claire tiptoed to the kitchen and picked up her phone. There was only one call she wanted to make. One call she needed to make. She dialed her mother. It rang. Once. Twice. Then her mother answered, music and laughter audible in the background. "Rachel," she asked, distracted. "Can I call you back? We're in the middle of Samantha's birthday dinner." Claire's voice cracked. "Mom. Daniel died this morning." The music faded. There was a pause, a beat too long. "Oh my God," her mother said finally, her voice lowering. "Are you sure? Maybe it's a mistake. I saw him." Claire interrupted, her voice cold. "He's gone." Another pause. "Oh honey, that's terrible. I mean, I can't believe it." Her mother's voice faltered, then steadied. "But Samantha's 40th, you know. The caterers are still here. We've got a house full of guests." Claire's mouth went dry. "So you're not coming?" "Well, maybe tomorrow. Once things have settled down a bit." Claire stood in the kitchen, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I just lost my husband." "I know," her mother said with the kind of sympathy reserved for someone else's tragedy. "We'll check in tomorrow, sweetheart." Then the line went dead. Claire didn't cry right away. She just stood there, numb. She stared at the wall, replaying the moment she told her mother. The disbelief. The dismissal. The birthday party taking precedence over death. She wanted to scream. To throw something. Instead, she went back to the living room and sat beside her daughter, who was murmuring in her sleep. Daniel's shirt still clutched to her chest. Claire held her again, whispering, "We're going to be okay," though she wasn't sure she believed it. The silence from her family echoed louder than any condolences ever could. Neighbors texted. Friends emailed. Daniel's coworkers left voicemails choked with emotion. But from her own family, there was nothing but silence or, worse, excuses. That night, Claire lay in bed with Ella curled against her. The room felt vast and hollow without Daniel. She kept reaching for him in her mind, his warmth, his breath, the gentle weight of his arm over her waist. None of it came. She stared at the ceiling, her chest heavy with grief and betrayal. The first night without Daniel, I didn't even have my parents. He always said I looked like a princess in blue. The days that followed Daniel's death were consumed by logistics calls to the funeral home, decisions about flowers, casket music, seating arrangements, food. Claire moved through it all in a fog, clutching a yellow legal pad like a lifeline, filling it with checkboxes she never wanted to check. There was no one else to do it. Daniel's parents were flying in from Oregon and wouldn't arrive until the day before the funeral. Ella was too young to understand the weight of arrangements. And her own parents, absent. Silent. Claire's phone vibrated the night before the funeral. It was a text from her mother. "What time is the service again? Should we wear black or that colorful stuff for a celebration of life thing?" Claire stared at the screen, her eyes burning. Daniel had been dead for 4 days. She had heard nothing but that. No offers to help. No checking in on Ella. Just a question about wardrobe, as if they were attending a brunch, not burying her husband. "Wear whatever makes you feel appropriate," she replied, her fingers trembling. The morning of the funeral dawned with a strange aching brightness. Claire stood by the window, watching the golden light spread across the lawn as if the universe were mocking her sorrow with its beauty. Ella appeared in the doorway, already dressed. She was wearing the blue dress. The one Daniel had picked out for her birthday last year. A soft periwinkle with tiny white flowers and a satin ribbon at the waist. Claire's breath caught. "Sweetheart, I want to wear this," Ella said softly, smoothing the skirt. "Daddy always said I looked like a princess in blue." Claire knelt and hugged her tightly. "You look beautiful." He'd be so proud. They arrived at the funeral home an hour early. Claire wanted time to compose herself, to greet people, to stand upright before the weight of the day tried to crush her. Daniel's colleagues from the firm came in first, men and women in dark suits, eyes already red, hands awkward with grief. They hugged her. They brought memories. One slipped her a folded note. "For Ella, when she's older," he said. Claire smiled through her tears. These were the people who had truly known Daniel. Who had seen him laugh in break rooms, champion clients, mentor interns, sneak out early to coach Ella's soccer team. They mourned as if they'd lost a brother. Her own family, nowhere. At 10:45, 15 minutes before the service, Claire's phone buzzed. A text from her sister Samantha, running late. "Traffic's a nightmare. Save us seats." Claire didn't respond. At 10:58, the doors opened again with a burst of cold air and the smell of expensive perfume. Her parents walked in first, then Samantha, dressed in a crimson wrap dress that belonged more at a gala than a funeral. Her mother wore navy with a sequined scarf. Her father nodded curtly at Claire as if greeting a client. Claire gestured wordlessly to the front row. Her mother offered a too-quick hug. "Oh, honey, I hope this isn't too much for you," she whispered. "It's all so sudden." Samantha had a hard time finding something appropriate to wear. Everything felt too cheery. Claire stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or scream. The service began. A cello played something low and mournful. Daniel's best friend Marcus, who had flown in from Tokyo, spoke first. Then Daniel's boss. Then Claire, clutching trembling note cards in her hands, stood to deliver the eulogy. She spoke of Daniel's warmth, his integrity, his obsession with real maple syrup, and his irrational hatred of cilantro. She told stories of dinosaur-shaped pancakes and whispered lullabies. She looked down at Ella sitting bravely in her blue dress and almost lost it, but didn't. When she returned to her seat, she saw her father glance at his watch. Her mother dabbed dry eyes with a tissue. Samantha was texting. And yet, Daniel's coworkers were crying openly. It was a study in contrast, strangers weeping while family fidgeted. At the reception in their home afterward, Claire noticed Daniel's college roommate helping arrange the food. Neighbors took out the trash. His parents stood quietly by Ella, holding her hands, their grief written in every line of their faces. Meanwhile, Claire's mother chatted in the living room with a distant cousin about her book club. Samantha posed near the flower arrangements for a photo. Claire walked past her, stunned, and caught a snatch of conversation. "I just feel like this whole thing could have been done in a garden. So much more uplifting." Claire bit her tongue until it bled. In the kitchen, she caught sight of Ella seated on the floor beside Daniel's mother, listening intently as she told a story about Daniel's childhood dog. Her little fingers clutched a cookie uneaten. Claire sat down beside them, exhausted. Daniel had been loved, deeply. But not always by the people who should have mattered most. Her mother appeared in the doorway. "We're heading out," she said, adjusting her scarf. "It's been a long day." Claire stood. "Thank you for coming. We'll check in next week." "Okay. Maybe lunch." "Maybe." She watched them leave her parents, her sister, and felt nothing. No sadness, no longing. Just space. A quiet, gaping space where love should have been. Claire turned back toward the living room and found Ella watching her. "Are they going to stay with us?" she asked. Claire shook her head. "No, sweetheart, they had other things to do." Ella nodded solemnly. "I'm glad I wore blue. Daddy liked blue." Claire smiled through the tears rising in her throat. "He would have said you were the most beautiful girl in the whole world." They came for Daddy's money, didn't they? 3 days had passed since the funeral. The house still smelled faintly of lilies and reheated casseroles. Claire had spent the last few mornings throwing herself into busywork, laundry, dishes, organizing Ella's backpack for school, even though school was still a week away. Anything to avoid thinking too much, feeling too much. That morning, just as Claire finished rinsing the last plate from a sympathy meal, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw her parents standing on the porch. Her father wore his usual country club golf shirt, tugging at the hem as if preparing for a presentation. Her mother was dabbing her lips with a tissue, checking her reflection in the glass. Claire opened the door slowly. "I didn't know you were coming," she said flatly. "We thought we'd check in. See how you and Ella are coping," her mother said with an airy wave, already brushing past her into the foyer. "She at school?" her father asked, stepping inside, uninvited. Claire hesitated. "She's at a playdate." "Why? Oh, good. Then we can speak openly," her mother replied, settling onto the couch as if this were some casual afternoon tea. The chill in Claire's spine deepened. She moved to the kitchen and made coffee out of reflex, not because she wanted to serve them, but because she didn't know what else to do with her hands. When she returned to the living room, her father was running his hand along the sound system Daniel had installed just weeks before he died. "Daniel had good taste," he remarked. Claire didn't answer. There was a moment of empty, sipping, her mother praising a throw pillow she had once mocked. Then her father set down his coffee cup delicately, precisely, and cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk to you about your situation," he began. Claire's stomach turned. "Your financial situation," her mother added, exchanging glances with him. Claire blinked. "What do you mean?" "Well," her father leaned forward, "we understand that Daniel had a substantial life insurance policy." Claire stiffened. "Yes, he did. He planned well. For me and Ella." "Exactly," her mother nodded. "And we're not trying to intrude, of course, but your father and I are getting older. Healthcare isn't cheap, you know. Retirement's not what it used to be." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Are you asking me for money?" "We're family," her father said simply, as if that were explanation enough. "We thought, given the circumstances, that sharing the proceeds, perhaps half, would be fair. After all, we did help you with college. And we contributed to your first house." The world tilted. Claire stared at them, her face expressionless, her insides screaming. "My husband's body is barely cold," she whispered. "And you're here asking for his insurance money." "It's not like that," her mother protested. "We're just saying. You're in a position to help. We helped you. This is about supporting each other as a family." "No," Claire said firmly. "This is about you seeing your son-in-law's death as a payday." Her father's expression hardened. "Let's not be dramatic, Claire. We're just trying to be practical. You missed most of the funeral," she snapped. "You've barely asked how Ella's doing. And now you want a piece of what Daniel left behind for us. That's not practical. That's obscene." Her mother tried again, this time with a softer tone. "Sweetheart, we understand you're grieving, but you have to think long term. You're still young, you'll recover." "But we get out," Claire said, standing. Her voice was shaking but resolute. "Now." "Claire," her father warned. "Out," she repeated louder. "I lost the love of my life. Ella lost her father. And the only thing you've managed to bring us is more grief. Take your coffee, take your guilt, and leave." They left in a huff, her mother muttering something about raising an ungrateful daughter, her father swearing under his breath about entitlement. Claire locked the door behind them and slid down to the floor breathless. When she picked up Ella later that afternoon, her daughter climbed into the car quietly. She sat clutching her backpack, then asked Mommy, "Grandma and Grandpa came over today, didn't they?" Claire glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Yes, they did." Ella looked down. "Did they bring anything, like flowers? Or Daddy's favorite book?" Claire swallowed hard. "No, honey. They didn't." A pause. "They came for Daddy's money, didn't they?" The question hit Claire like a slap. "What makes you say that?" she asked gently. "I heard Grandpa say something at the funeral. He told Uncle James that you'd be rich now. Because Daddy died." Claire blinked back tears. "Sweetheart, that money is to take care of us. Your school. Your future. Daddy made sure of that." Ella nodded. "I'd give it all back just to hug him again." Claire reached back and squeezed her daughter's hand. "So would I, baby. So would I. This is what you earned." Claire had barely had time to catch her breath after turning her parents away when the next blow landed: a message from her father, then one from her mother, and finally one from her sister. "Samantha, family meeting. This concerns all of us. Sunday at 2 p.m. Be there. Bring Ella." It wasn't a request, it was a command. Claire considered ignoring it, but something in her gut told her this was the confrontation that had been brewing for years. Maybe it was time to face them all at once. No more whispered manipulations. No more emotional blackmail behind closed doors. Ella sat beside her as she read the texts, her small brow furrowed. "Do we have to go, Mom?" Claire hesitated. "I think we should," she said slowly. "Sometimes we have to look people in the eye when they show us who they really are." Ella nodded quietly. "Then I want to bring something." She didn't say what it was. Just disappeared into her room with her art supplies and a determined look that reminded Claire so achingly of Daniel it hurt to breathe. Sunday arrived, gray and cold. As they pulled up to Claire's childhood home, Claire noticed several unfamiliar cars. Her aunts, her uncles, cousins. The entire extended family had been summoned. So it really was a performance. "Ready?" Claire asked. Ella clutched a large manila envelope tightly in her hands. "I'm ready, Mom. Don't worry." The door swung open before they could knock. "Claire." Ella, her mother said, lips tight, voice rehearsed. "Everyone's waiting." Inside, the living room was set up like a tribunal. Her father sat in his recliner, positioned like a judge. Samantha lounged on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. Around the room, Aunt Beverly, Uncle Ron, Cousin Jacob. All watching. All curious. Claire stayed standing. "If you have something to say, you can say it in front of my daughter. This isn't really a discussion for children," her mother began. "If it's not appropriate for her to hear," Claire replied coldly, "then it's not appropriate for you to say." Her father sighed. "Fine, let's be civil. Your mother and I have discussed the financial situation and we've prepared a fair breakdown." He handed her a document. "We think 50% of the insurance should go to us. Another 15% to Samantha, who, as you know, is still finding her footing. The rest, of course, remains with you." Claire scanned the document, actual dollar amounts itemized. As if Daniel's death were a business transaction. "You think I owe you 65% of what Daniel left for me and Ella?" she asked quietly. "You wouldn't even be in this house without our help," her mother said. "We paid for your tuition. We gave you a start. This is just balance. You couldn't even leave Samantha's birthday dinner when I called to tell you Daniel had died," Claire said, voice trembling. A heavy silence fell. Samantha finally looked up from her phone. "Can we not make this about feelings? You're financially secure now, we're just asking for fairness." Claire opened her mouth to speak, but Ella was already on her feet. "I have something to say." Everyone turned. Her voice was clear. Small, unshakable. "Sweetheart," her grandmother smiled tightly. "The adults are." "No," Ella interrupted. "This is important too." She walked slowly to the center of the room, pulled out the folded paper from her envelope and held it up. "I made something. For you." She handed it to her grandfather. It was a drawing, but not just a drawing. It was a bill. Titled in bold crayon, "Invoice for real love and support." Underneath were handwritten lines holding mommy when she cried $0, not provided. Calling to check on me $0, not provided. Helping with daddy's funeral $0, not provided. Being real grandparents, priceless, not delivered. Total $0. The room froze. Claire watched as her father's hands trembled holding the page. Her mother paled. Samantha looked as if she'd been slapped. "This is what you earned," Ella said, her voice soft, her eyes blazing with pain, far too old for an 8-year-old. "You didn't come when Daddy died. You didn't help us. You just want money. But Daddy didn't leave it for you." She turned to Claire. "Can we go now?" Claire stood, heart swelling with pride and heartbreak in equal measure. She took Ella's hand. "Yes, baby, we're done here." Without another word, they walked out of the house. The silence left behind was louder than any scream. "Don't let anyone touch our daughter's future." In the weeks after the confrontation at her parents' house, the house grew quiet again, but it was no longer empty. The silence that filled the rooms wasn't hollow like before. It was softer, reflective. It was the kind of silence that let you hear your own breath and realize, maybe for the first time, that you were still breathing. Claire enrolled herself in therapy. The first session was awkward. She sat across from a woman in her 60s with a warm smile and kind eyes, and when asked how she was doing, Claire answered, "Honestly, I don't know." She expected the therapist to dig into her grief about Daniel. But instead they began with a different question. "When was the last time you were allowed to be angry, Claire?" That question hung in the room like smoke. Claire stared at the floor, eyes burning. The answer, she realized, was never. Not when her parents dismissed her pain as drama. Not when Samantha stole attention at every childhood birthday. Not even when her husband died and the people who should have held her collapsed into silence and entitlement. Week by week, she showed up. Some days she cried. Some days she said nothing. Some days she simply sat with the weight of everything she had never voiced, and that too was part of healing. At home, Ella had started her own form of therapy. Every night before bed, she pulled out a notebook she had labeled "Letters to Daddy." In it she wrote with a purple glitter pen, starting every letter the same. "Dear Daddy, I miss you." Claire never read the letters unless invited. But sometimes when she tucked Ella in, her daughter would read a few aloud. "Today I got an A on my math test. I remembered the trick you taught me about multiplying 9s with my fingers. Also, the lunch Mom packed had carrot sticks again. Please remind her I don't like them." Claire would laugh through her tears, kissing Ella's forehead as she whispered, "Duly noted." 3 weeks after the funeral, Marcus moved back from Tokyo. He showed up at the front door with nothing but a suitcase, a guitar, and a bag of Japanese snacks for Ella. "I made a promise to Daniel," he told Claire simply. "He said if anything ever happened to him, I was to take care of his girls." Claire hugged him without a word. Marcus fit into their lives like a missing puzzle piece. He drove Ella to school when Claire had therapy. He taught Ella a few chords on the guitar. He cooked elaborate stir-fries with too much soy sauce and played old jazz records in the evenings. He didn't try to replace Daniel. He didn't try to fix Claire, he just stayed. Sometimes that was everything. One afternoon, while Claire was reading on the porch, Ella ran out with flour on her nose and a smudge of chocolate on her cheek. "Grandma and I made cookies," she declared. Claire blinked in surprise. "Grandma." She stepped into the kitchen and found Daniel's mother, Eileen, wearing an apron and dusting powdered sugar on a tray. "I hope you don't mind," she said, smiling. Ella said it was a cookie emergency. Claire felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. "I don't mind at all." Eileen had flown back the week after the funeral but stayed in a nearby Airbnb, giving Claire space while also quietly showing up, bringing groceries, folding laundry, attending therapy with Ella's school counselor. She never asked for anything in return. That afternoon, they sat together in the kitchen eating cookies that were slightly burnt on the bottom but full of love. And in that moment, Claire felt something she hadn't in weeks: comfort. Not joy, not peace, but something close. A moment to exhale. That night after Ella had gone to bed, Claire opened the last of the envelopes Daniel's lawyer had given her labeled in his handwriting. For when you're ready. Inside was a letter. Ink on thick paper. The handwriting that had once written love notes in the margins of grocery lists. Claire, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I didn't want this letter to exist, but I couldn't leave you and Ella without something. I know you'll be strong. Not in the way people expect you to be, but in the way you already are. Quietly, gracefully. Don't let anyone tell you how to grieve. Don't let anyone rush you back to normal. And please don't let anyone touch our daughter's future. Everything I've built, every choice I've made was for you and for her. I trust you to protect that, Claire. I trust you to love her through the dark. And on the days it feels too hard, know that I loved you so completely the echo of it will carry you. Always, Daniel. Claire read it twice. Then a third time, tears falling silently onto the ink. She folded it back into the envelope, placed it in her nightstand, and whispered to the empty room, I won't let you down. If they truly change, I'll give them a chance, just like Daddy would. The letter arrived on a Thursday, tucked among utility bills and a grocery flyer. Claire almost missed it, plain white envelope, no return address. But the handwriting on the front stopped her. She hadn't seen it in years. Precise. Slightly slanted. Her mother's. She hesitated before opening it. The weight in her chest surprised her, some strange mix of dread, resentment, and a flicker of something else. Something close to hope. Or maybe just curiosity. Inside were 2 folded sheets of paper. The first was from her mother. Claire, I know a letter can't undo what we've done or failed to do. But I need you to hear this without my voice, without my tone, without my pride getting in the way. I've replayed the day of Daniel's funeral more times than I can admit. I see myself walking in late. I see your face. I remember asking about my dress. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. You lost the man you built a life with, and I showed up like a guest, not a mother. I was selfish. I was shallow. I was cruel. And when we asked about the insurance, I told myself we were being practical. But the truth is we were being greedy. Thoughtless. You didn't owe us anything. But we acted like you did. I've spent years believing I raised strong daughters. But you raised yourself, Claire. You became strong despite me. I'm sorry for that too. The second letter was shorter. Her father's, Claire, I've never been good at apologies. But I need to say this, I was wrong. About Daniel. About money. About you. I've always valued control and logic over feelings. I thought providing help in the past meant I had earned a say in your future. But you made your life. Not us. I'm sorry I didn't show up when it mattered. I see that now. Claire stared at the pages for a long time. The words didn't erase anything. They didn't take away the sting of being abandoned when she needed her parents most. They didn't undo years of quiet wounds of being the overlooked daughter, the one expected to handle everything, but they were words they'd never said before. And they were written, not spoken, left for her to absorb in silence and safety. That alone meant something. She set the letters aside and stood by the window, watching Ella in the backyard with Marcus kicking a soccer ball across the lawn. Eileen sat in a lawn chair nearby, cheering each kick like it was the World Cup. Claire stepped outside and joined them. Later that night, while tucking Ella into bed, Claire mentioned the letters just briefly. She didn't expect Ella to react much, but her daughter sat up straight. What did they say? They said sorry, Claire replied carefully. For a lot of things, for how they treated me, for how they acted when Daddy died. Ella was quiet for a moment, then asked, did you forgive them? Claire hesitated. Not yet. I'm not sure if I can. Or if I should. Ella nodded thoughtfully, then looked her mother square in the eyes. If they really change, I'll give them a chance. Claire blinked. You would? Ella nodded again. That's what Daddy would do, right? He always said people should get second chances, but only if they earned them. Claire smiled through the sudden sting of tears. He did say that. Ella yawned and curled up under the covers. We can watch. See if they really mean it. Claire kissed her forehead. We can. As she turned off the light, she whispered into the dark. You taught her well, Daniel. Some branches need to grow apart to survive. Claire had always thought of family as something fixed like a tree whose roots couldn't be dug up, whose branches couldn't be trimmed. But now, with time and distance between her and the chaos of grief, she saw things differently. A tree could grow new limbs. Some branches could be pruned. And some, she realized, never truly bore fruit. After the letters from her parents, Claire waited 2 weeks before replying. Her message was brief but firm. Thank you for your words. I'm not ready to resume things as before, but Ella has asked to see you. We can arrange short visits in public places with me present. Let's start there. No love, Claire. No promises, just boundaries. Her mother responded within the hour, unusually restrained. Understood. Thank you for the chance. The first meeting took place at the cafe near the park, a neutral ground. Claire arrived early with Ella and picked a table by the window. Ella wore the pink cardigan Daniel had given her for her last birthday. She clutched a small notebook, the one labeled Letters to Daddy. When her grandparents walked in, Claire tensed automatically. But, to their credit, they didn't reach for hugs, they didn't launch into apologies. They simply smiled and said, "Hi, Ella. You look taller." Ella looked at Claire, who gave a small nod. Then she replied, "I've been practicing standing straight." The hour passed gently. Her parents asked about school. Ella talked about soccer. They listened, really listened. No mention of money, no excuses for the past. Claire stayed quiet for most of it, watching, observing. At the end, her father asked if they could see Ella again the following weekend. Claire replied without hesitation. Same time, same place. Over the next month, the meetings continued. Always in public. Always brief. Her parents brought coloring books. Hot chocolate. Once a small bouquet of daffodils, Daniel's favorite flower. They never tried to come to the house. Never overstepped. And for Claire, that mattered more than any apology. I think they're trying, Ella said one afternoon as they walked home. Not perfect. But not pretending anymore. Claire squeezed her hand. That's a start. In early spring, Claire organized a small memorial for Daniel, something separate from the funeral, something warmer. A celebration, yes, but on her own terms. They held it at the community garden Daniel had volunteered at, where he used to take Ella on weekends to plant tomatoes and pull weeds. The garden manager offered the space for free. Marcus helped string up lights. Eileen baked 3 of Daniel's favorite pies. Ella made paper butterflies and hung them from the trees. Claire invited everyone, Daniel's coworkers, friends, neighbors, and yes, even her own family. Daniel's parents sat up front. Marcus played guitar quietly in the background. Ella read a short letter aloud that began, "Dear Daddy, the tomatoes you planted are growing." Claire stood and spoke, not from note cards this time, but from memory. He didn't believe in perfect families. He believed in people trying. In small kindnesses. In second chances earned, not expected. At the back of the crowd, Claire saw her parents standing quietly. Not pushing forward, not claiming space, just being there. And for once it was enough. Afterward, as guests began to leave, Claire walked over to them. Her father looked older than she remembered. Her mother's eyes welled but didn't spill. "We'll head out," her mother said softly. "Thank you for letting us come." Claire nodded. "Thank you for staying in the back." There was no sarcasm. Just truth. Before they turned to go, her father looked down at Ella and said, "You made your daddy proud today." Ella gave a small smile. "I think so too." Claire watched them walk away, not with anger, not with longing. Just clarity. That night, as she and Ella watered the new flowers they'd planted under Daniel's photo in the backyard, Ella asked, "Do you think family means the people who are always around?" Claire knelt beside her, pressing soil around a daffodil. "No," she said softly. "I think family means the people who choose to stay and choose to do better when they've done wrong." Ella nodded, then added, "Even if they stay a little further away." Claire smiled. "Even then. You don't have to wear a cape to be someone's hero." It started with a chessboard. Marcus had found it tucked in a box of Daniel's things, oak wood with hand-carved pieces, a gift Claire had given him years ago when he'd said he wanted to teach Ella how to play someday. Someday had never come. Until now. Your dad was going to show you this, Marcus said, setting the board up on the kitchen table. You ready to learn? Ella nodded solemnly. I want to beat you by Christmas. He laughed. Game on, kid. They played in the afternoons after school, Marcus teaching her opening move strategies, how to protect the queen and sacrifice a pawn when needed. Ella picked it up quickly, brow furrowed in concentration, fingers tapping her chin like her father used to do. Claire watched them from the doorway, heart heavy and full at once. The game wasn't just about chess. It was about legacy, one small strategic piece at a time. Meanwhile, Claire had been pouring herself into something bigger. Daniel had always believed that financial literacy was a superpower, one that too few people had access to. He talked about it constantly, the way people were shamed for not understanding credit, how young adults weren't taught about saving or compounding interest, or how to read a paycheck. So Claire took a leap. She used a portion of Daniel's life insurance, not for herself, not even for Ella, but to start a scholarship fund. The Daniel Reynolds Foundation. Its mission to provide free financial literacy workshops to high school students in underserved communities and to offer scholarships for those pursuing careers in finance, economics, or nonprofit leadership. She started small, a pilot program at the local high school. Her first seminar had 15 kids. By the second week, there were 30. She stood at the front of the room in a blazer Daniel used to call her boss armor and said, "Money doesn't make you powerful. But understanding it, that's power." Every time she spoke, she saw Daniel in the back of her mind, arms crossed, smiling that quiet, proud smile of his. Ella, meanwhile, had started her own form of tribute. One evening, Claire found her daughter hunched over a sketchpad, tongue sticking out in focus. "What are you working on?" she asked gently. Ella held up the page, a colorful drawing of a tall man in a blue cape carrying a little girl on his back. "It's Daddy," Ella said. "But he's super dad. He helps kids fix their piggy banks and teaches them how to build tree houses. And when people are sad, he hugs them until they're not." Claire smiled, her throat tight. Each week, Ella added new pages. A scene where Superdad rescued a school from losing its art program by teaching the principal how to budget. Another where he used his super hearing to know when someone needed a hug before they even said it out loud. "Do you think other kids would like to read this?" Ella asked one night. "I think they'd love it," Claire whispered. Spring returned. The air smelled like growth and grass. The days were longer, the nights less heavy. Claire still had her moments, tears in the car, quiet aches when a memory came uninvited, but she no longer felt defined by absence. She was building again. One Saturday, Claire packed a small picnic and drove Ella and Marcus to the lake, Daniel's lake. It had been his favorite spot, a quiet patch of water surrounded by pine trees and silence. He used to bring Ella here to skip stones and tell stories about the dragon that lived under the lily pads. They laid out a blanket, ate sandwiches, played cards. And as the sun dipped lower, Claire walked down to the edge of the water. She stood there for a long time, the wind playing gently with her hair, the water reflecting the soft gold of dusk. Ella came up beside her, sliding her hand into Claire's. "Mom, yes. He would have liked today." Claire nodded. "I think he was here." They stood in silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Marcus approached a few minutes later, placing a small rock at the base of a tree nearby. On it he had written, "Not gone, just everywhere else now." They all stood there, three people bound by grief, love, and something beyond blood. Claire took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt. She smiled, not the polite smile she wore at work or the forced one at family gatherings, but a real one. One Daniel would have recognized. The best way to remember Daddy is to live like him. It had been a year. 12 full moons since Claire stood in a sterile hospital room and held Daniel's hand for the last time. 12 seasons of aching, adjusting, rebuilding. A year of firsts without him. First birthday, first Christmas, first night she didn't cry herself to sleep. But it was also a year of resilience. Of rediscovery. Now Claire stood at the kitchen counter slicing apples for Ella's lunchbox, sunlight streaming through the window, catching the edges of picture frames, one of Daniel and Ella skipping rocks, one of Claire and Marcus standing beside the new Scholarship plaque and one hand drawn by Ella's superdad flying through the clouds. Behind her, the house was no longer silent, it was calm, peaceful. Full of boundaries but also of laughter. Claire had learned the difference between being alone and being at peace. Between forgiving and forgetting. Between family by blood and family by choice. She no longer measured love in obligation but in presence. Her parents now saw Ella once a month at the library, at the botanical garden, sometimes on a bench in the park. They never brought up the past. Claire never brought them back into her home. That boundary remained. And yet in their eyes, Claire saw something new: effort. Earnestness. Maybe even humility. Marcus had signed a year-long lease nearby. He still made too much soy sauce stir-fry and played jazz too loud on Sunday mornings. Eileen had become Ella's go-to baking partner and Claire's quiet confidant. And Ella had grown into something luminous. She still wrote to Daniel, though less often now. Her comic book superdad had been chosen for the school's creativity showcase. Her teachers described her as compassionate but assertive. Fiercely empathetic. The kind of child who made sure no one sat alone at lunch and made it clear if someone crossed a line. That night after dinner, they took a walk to the lake. It had become a tradition, one Claire once feared would break her but now looked forward to. They didn't come to grieve anymore. They came to remember. To thank. To live. Ella skipped ahead, backpack bouncing, notebook in hand. Claire walked slower, savoring the sound of gravel underfoot, of frogs croaking in the distance, of the wind gently ruffling the surface of the water like Daniel's hand had brushed it on his way by. They reached the bench under the tall pine tree, his bench. Ella sat cross-legged and opened her notebook. "I finished the last page," she announced proudly. Claire sat beside her. "Can I see?" Ella nodded and turned the book. The drawing showed Superdad standing on a hill looking out over a world blooming with flowers and smiling people. In his hand he held a sign that read, "Be kind, but don't let them take your cape." Claire blinked back tears. "I love it," she said softly. Ella leaned against her. "I think the best way to remember Daddy is to live like him." Claire looked at her daughter, so young and yet so wise. "And how's that?" Ella smiled, eyes full of certainty. "Kind. But strong. Not letting anyone use our kindness against us." Claire wrapped an arm around her. And in that moment, bathed in twilight, surrounded by echoes of loss and love, Claire knew she had broken. She had bent. But she had not disappeared. Daniel may have been gone. But his strength, his love, his values, they were alive. In Ella. In Claire. In every seed they had planted in the world he left behind. And as the stars blinked to life above the lake, Claire whispered a final thank you into the wind. "We remember you, Daniel. Not with pain, but with purpose." The end. But not really. Because grief doesn't end, love doesn't either. And sometimes the greatest stories aren't the ones that begin with perfection, but the ones where kindness